Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this webinar to update on progress with the cross-border Red Squirrel Recovery Network project, which aims to support and enhance the important red squirrel conservation work taking place across areas of Northern England and Southern Scotland. I'm Kay Hoare from the UK Squirrel Accord, and I'm joined by Mike Denbury of Red Squirrels Northern England, Catherine Williams, who's been doing a sterling job pulling all of this together for us, Mike Pratt of Northumberland Wildlife Trust, and Sarah Beetham of the Animal and Plant Health Agency. Each of our speakers will give presentations on different aspects of the project, and afterwards there will be a Q&A session. Please keep questions relevant to the Red Squirrel Recovery Network and use the Q&A section of Zoom to ask questions, as it helps me to keep track of things. The chat function is there to say hello, share comments, and for any general discussions among yourselves. Please let me know if there are any issues. I think this time I have actually changed the chat setting so that everybody can speak to everybody in the beginning. And so now I will hand over to Mike Pratt for our first presentation.
Welcome everyone. It's really great to have this a chance just to rehearse where we are with this amazing and important project. I just wanted to reflect first of all on just how long we've all been fighting the cause and holding the line for red squirrels. It's a considerable time. You know, the Northumberland Wildlife Trust, looking back now, has been involved for over nearly 25 years or more in red squirrel conservation, from the days of Red Alert, which some of you will remember, even pre-Red Alert, right the way through Save Our Squirrels and Red Squirrels United, and now, you know, an RSRN, of course, and all of the work that has been integrated with all of the groups over that time. It is truly a landscape of conservation effort at a scale really that's quite surprising and unique, probably across Europe. And I think the one thing that I also like to reflect on is the amount of money that we've actually been able to raise to keep that red squirrel in that landscape. You know, up to now, it's at least 15 million. You know, for one species. Again, it's probably of a European order of importance in terms of the scale. If we get this extra funding for this next project, it's going to be 20 million. And it's a really, really substantial amount of funding which we're trying to focus on this species. And of course, there's a good reason for that, because it is an iconic creature, but it's also a very important part of that whole landscape, which we keep mentioning, which in this case means the north of England and southern Scotland. And that is really key, I think. It is a landscape project. And it's very easy, I think, when you're focusing on one species, which is so iconic, to forget the real context in which we're actually working here. And I think the name of the new project gives that away. It's the Red Squirrel Recovery Network. That's what we've all been working on for many, many years. Because the red squirrel never, like any species, doesn't exist in isolation. It's very much connected to a whole ecosystem, a whole functional, hopefully more functional ecosystem into the future. And in fact, all the wildlife trusts, all the organisations across that whole area are working together to restore nature at massive landscape connected scale. This is about ecological connectivity through the red squirrel and its conservation effort. And that's what we're trying to map and plan and work on with yourselves, a whole community of support that is trying to ensure the red squirrel is there into the future in that landscape. And it is important to see it within that ecosystem and also natural processes context. The red squirrel is but one animal, but it is actually really important. Even just looking at the landscape that we're creating and the habitats that the red squirrel and also the grey squirrel actually live in within that whole area, we know immediately it's about connectivity, because it's the connectivity of watercourses and riverine and waterside, trees, hedgerows, woodlands, at all different scales across the whole of the piece, which allows those squirrels to thrive within that landscape still. Of course, not thriving as much as we would like, and hence that's why we're still talking about this great effort going forward. I think we've been holding the line. That's our ambition, to actually not just not allow the red squirrel to disappear in that landscape, but at least to maintain it perhaps in the future to actually increase it even further. And we do see it coming back in corners, and certainly in Cumbria very successfully, parts of Northumberland too. So we all know we're sort of winning the battle, but we also know, all of you know, it's not that simple or straightforward or black and white or red and grey. It really is a complex picture, and it's one that, like everything ecological, it's multi-layered. So I think that's all I really want to say at this point. I do think, we do need to think of the squirrel alongside other species within there as well. And very much conservation, wilding, landscape scale, natural process, and nature recovery is around seeing a whole suite of species, not just that are there now, but also actually even seeing where some reintroduction is appropriate as well. And I mean that from the flowers all the way through up to the higher mammals. And so again, the red squirrel sits very much right in the frame of all of that. You could see in that picture of the red squirrel there, that little paw holding a myriad of little links, of strings, of a web of massive connected ecosystem across the whole of the north of England. And I think purely that why we are actually so interested in the red squirrel in particular is that it is such a great and beautiful animal to actually be at the front of that cause of restoration, of conservation across the north of England. Why wouldn't we want it as our icon into the future? So that's my thoughts around it. We'll come back to it, I'm sure, with questions, and I'll be here to respond if people want to take me up on any of that later on. So it's great to have this conversation. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Catherine Williams. If you've not met me before, I'm a consultant supporting this project development, and I've been working with Northumberland Wildlife Trust and the other partners on Red Squirrel projects for a number of years now, since before Red Squirrels United started. And dread to think how long ago that was, some time. So I've got 5 minutes to very quickly share with you a project summary, and all of the information I'm going to share with you now was on the handout that hopefully everyone has seen. So I'm going to whiz through it really quickly. First of all, I just wanted to share 2 slides with you, which we shared with the lottery with our round 1 application, which really put this project in context and kind of explain why this project is so necessary. None of this is going to be new to you. You all live and breathe this, but this is just to show you that this is the reason that we've been kind of expressing to the lottery of why we want to do this project. So this first slide shows the spread of the grey squirrels and the loss of the red squirrel only populations. But I think also in that third map on the right hand side, it really clearly shows why this project needs to operate across Northern England and Southern Scotland and bring both those areas together to work across the whole of the red squirrel population range between those two, well, the northern band of greys and then the southern complete mass of greys, I suppose. Yeah, so that's our basis for the project. Can you move on, Mike, to the next slide? And this is just a close-up of that area, really, showing how it's changed from 2010 to 2020, and where in 2010 we still had some red squirrel only areas. We've really got very few of those now, with both species really present across the area, and that is obviously across Southern Scotland and Northern England. And then also included within our project, sorry, Mike, just go back. Sorry, Mike's doing the mouse. Just to say that also included within our project area is the bit in the southwest of that circle, which is the Merseyside area. So even though that's an isolated population of reds down there, we still see that very much as connected to this Northern England, Southern Scotland population. Okay, yeah, move on now. So as Mike has said, this project is building on the conservation efforts of 20 years or more. It's ambitious project, but doesn't stand alone. It's it's building on what's already happened, and it's responding to the needs identified through consultation, and that consultation is ongoing, both with volunteers and volunteer groups, but also with a whole range of other partners, communities, individuals, people that live with red squirrels, etc., etc. Obviously, we're learning from the survey data. We're looking at how we can make the next steps more possible, and how we can work towards sustainability. There's a big element of raising awareness in this project, and a big element of connecting people to nature. We have to do that. We know that the more people that are more connected to nature, more aware, that's the only way we'll change things for nature in the future, and get more people on board with that. But also, people benefit in so many ways, from their mental well-being, physical activity, etc., etc., and being more connected to nature. And all the partners are committed to delivering that. So this project has to sit as part of that wider ambition as well. And then my final slide. Oh, sorry, not the final slide. So this shows you in a bit more detail the project area, and how these are all the volunteer groups and the red site. Yeah, these are the areas where the volunteer groups are active across our project area. There's obviously a few gaps. There's areas where it's busier, but we'll be working with all those groups to hopefully provide a bit more support than can be provided at the moment, and to engage all those groups in a shared strategy. And then my final slide is a quick summary of the money side of things. So we're asking the lottery for £4.8 million. With that, we'll contribute to the partners, will jointly contribute £650,000 in real cash match money, and we'll also contribute £700,000 in kind. So that's in terms of volunteers that are contributing directly to the project. Not all the volunteer effort that's supporting red squirrels, but that which is contributing directly to the project. We're expecting the project to run from April 2025 for 5 years, and that it will leave a legacy in 2030, meaning that we're in a better position then, a more sustainable position. We've included all the costs there. I'm not going to talk through them all, but just really to point out that some of those costs, in particular the grey squirrel control, is match funding that's going in. But yeah, all of those costs are part of the project that, to a greater or lesser degree, will be supported by the lottery. That's it from me.
Thank you, Catherine. For those of you I have not had the opportunity to meet, my name is Mike Denbury. I'm the Red Squirrels Northern England Project Officer, project manager even, and the project manager for this phase of the Red Squirrel Recovery Network. I'd like to take an opportunity to talk about the current status of the project. We are in the 12-month delivery phase, development phase. The lottery have provided funding for the partners to work together to actually formulate the application for the full 5-year project. So some of the key activities that are taking place at the moment. The partnership are undertaking the activities in different areas, and they're designed to address the objectives of the project and also meet the funding requirements. The activities take place in different stages during this development phase, and different partners will be carrying out different activities in different areas. One of the key tasks is the development of the communication plan. This is a key area of the project. We know that to increase support, we need to increase understanding and awareness. The communication plan will look at messages at all levels, from local levels up to national levels as well. It'll raise awareness of the need for red squirrel conservation, and also encourage people to be actively involved themselves, whether this be through volunteering or supporting those that do. We'll also be developing an audience engagement plan. There's 2 strands to this: trying to inspire people to connect with and learn about natural heritage and red squirrels, and empowering people to act to protect their natural heritage, inspiring them to move from a position of inspiration into taking action. The engagement plan will pull together feedback from the community consultations that have taken place, as well as the learnings from volunteer engagement, as well as some of the school resources that are being created. We are working with groups to identify opportunities for volunteering and ways in which they can build the membership and support. We are also creating an activity programs. These are set out in the activity plan and helps to identify key tasks that the project will be undertaking, both in the delivery phase and also in the full 5 years of the project. At the moment, we are working on the terms of reference for the membership of the new Project Advisory Commission, which will bring together volunteer representatives, statutory partners, and other stakeholders. And this group together will help to inform the direction of the project and what is going to be delivered. We're also establishing a consistent baseline of data across the project area. This is an important stage because we need to know where we are now so that we can judge what we need to do in the future and also the success of any activities that are undertaken. The data will come from different places, different sources, things like the spring surveys, squirrel management activity, the volunteer demographics, and public awareness as well. We're also working on a legacy plan, which defines what will happen after the project. We need to ensure that the solutions are sustainable and for the long term. We're also working on the detailed methodology for the field trials, which will intended to work at a landscape scale and look at how delivery mechanisms for the oral contraceptive can be put in place. Sarah will be speaking more about this shortly. And also we're developing a community grant scheme. More details about this in a minute as well. But the work includes agreeing criteria for the funding, establishing a grants panel, and producing guidance information. So a few examples of some of the engagement work that's been undertaken at the moment. We've been working with volunteer groups to better understand the groups themselves and their volunteers. We're asking them, the volunteers, why they are volunteering, what barriers and challenges they see, what they feel they need to encourage more volunteers, and what is working well. Our engagement teams have been working with younger audiences. If we can inspire the younger generation, they will become future supporters of the red squirrel conservation movement. And activities have been undertaken to find out what they understand about red squirrel conservation. Are they aware of the volunteer community groups that exist? And also to try and understand how we can better share information with them and raise the awareness of the key issues. We've also been undertaking activities with school groups and local community groups. Work in some of the schools to trial a number of different activities with the widest range of age groups possible, investigating which activities work best. A good example on the bottom right of the screen is a rather intriguing game based on Capture the Flag, which actually demonstrates the spread of squirrel pox within the squirrel habitats. So there are a number of different innovative approaches, and all of these feedback from all of these will be combined in the development phase to better influence the application to the lottery and the project itself. That's it from me, and back to Catherine.
Oh, sorry, I was just not quite in control of my mute button then. Okay, so yeah, thanks, Mike. This slide is just to talk to you a little about a bit about how volunteer groups will directly can directly engage with the project or might directly benefit from the project. So within the project budget, we're hoping to include, or we will be including, an equipment budget for volunteer groups, That is to be confirmed, but at the moment we're working on something around £1,000 per year per group. Volunteer groups will also be able to take part in training provided by the project, and we've got a couple of sessions coming up which we'll talk to you about at the end of this session, to start some preliminary kind of training discussions and looking at what that training might look like. And volunteer groups will also be able to take part in the fertility control trials that Sarah's about to talk about, and other support as needed. The main thing with this project is that there'll be more staff employed, so there should be a lot more support available, and more points of contact for groups in their area. We've been having quite a lot of discussion about how do we define what a Red Squirrel volunteer group is, and how will we make sure that suddenly the number of groups doesn't double, drawing on our budget and really taking budget away from the groups that are core to the project. So this list on the right hand side of this slide is just our current ideas, and we'd appreciate people's comments on this in the chat or in the Q&A later on, about how groups might be affiliated to the project, if you like, in order to be able to take part in it. So first of all, the main objective of the group will need to be that they exist to protect or celebrate red squirrels. That has to be a core function of that group. And it's also quite important that it's, first and foremost, our priority is to protect the reds rather than to eliminate the greys. Not that we're shying away from controlling the greys, but controlling the greys is a means to an end to protect the reds. Groups to take part or to receive the equipment budget and to be able to take part in the training, etc., the groups will need to be recognised by Northern Red Squirrels or the Red Squirrel Forum for South Scotland. They'll need to agree to share their data and support survey activities, which most groups already do. So we're not thinking that this is adding more kind of limitations to how groups currently engage with RSRN, etc. They maintain regular communications, they engage with the project positively, and they won't kind of take the money and then post things on social media or bring the project into disrepute. We'll be open to receiving comments, but we'd like that to be done not in public. So I think that's it for that group. I'm looking forward to discussing that a bit more at the end of the session. We're going to hand over to Sarah now, so there'll be a bit of slide swapping around for Sarah to talk through the fertility control side of things.
Okay.
Are you able to share your screen, Sarah?
Yeah, just sharing it now. So I go to.
Yeah,
Can everyone see that? Okay.
Yeah.
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 Okay. So yes, I'm Sarah Beetham from the Animal and Plant Health Agency, and many of you are probably aware that we're currently developing an oral contraceptive for grey squirrels that we are aiming to be delivered in a bait via squirrel-specific feeders. So currently, the research is at a stage at APHA where we've basically got a contraceptive bait, which is an immunocontraceptive vaccine. We've shown that it can induce infertility in lab rats. So we've been doing a lot of our work as part of lab rat trials. And we've also shown that it can induce an immune response in grey squirrels as well. So we have a captive colony of grey squirrels at our site in York, purely to test our contraceptives on. So this is where we've got to with the contraceptive development itself. At the moment, we have some more trials planned where we are refining the formulation of the contraceptive. So we want to try and improve its consistency amongst different animals, different individuals, but also we need to increase the strength of the response, particularly in squirrels, to ensure it's as effective as possible. But alongside this research, we've obviously been developing suitable delivery methods as well. So we need to ensure that the delivery is targeted towards grey squirrels only. and also that it's effective so we can reach as many grey squirrels as possible with the methods. So for the last few years, we've had numerous trials being undertaken at APHA and with volunteer groups as well. But now we want to transfer those methods and test them on a larger scale, which is why it's important that we're a part of the Red Squirrel Recovery Network. So can you see that slide okay? Is it a bit cut off? Is it okay? I'll move that a little bit. So basically, the work that we're looking at is split into 2 trials. So the first trial is looking at developing a contraceptive feeder that can be used in areas where there's both red and grey squirrels. So the research leading up to this contraceptive feeder, so for the last few years, many of you may have actually been aware or been involved in these trials. We've been looking at using body weight, the difference in body weight between grey and red squirrels to develop a feeder that can exclude all red squirrels whilst allowing access by the majority of grey squirrels to a contraceptive. So we've been deploying automatic weighers attached to feeders in a number of different counties. We've deployed them in woodlands in Northumberland, Cumbria, North Yorkshire, North Wales, and we've been monitoring these feeders and taking as many weights of red squirrels as possible. So from this research, we have been able to show that the maximum red squirrel body weights at different times of year and across lots of different areas in Northern England and Wales are between 415 grams and 438 grams. So from this, we looked at, we compared these weights with red squirrel weights. So we decided that if we were to set a threshold of 450 gram body weight, would that exclude all red squirrels whilst allowing the majority of greys access? And by looking at body weights we've gathered through APHA trials and from those collected by practitioners, we've shown that we can basically between 76 and 96% of grey squirrels are at least 450 grams. So when we break this down, we summarise that a weight threshold of 450 grams would exclude all red squirrels while allowing at least 90% of adult greys access to a bait and at least 76% of juvenile and adults together in a population. So obviously with our contraceptive, we're targeting mainly adults, predominantly breeding females. So this would seem to be a suitable selective method to ensure we can safely deliver the contraceptive to grey squirrels and not reds. So we have put this research into a prototype feeder, and this was developed by Barry Bickerton up in Northumberland. And this feeder works by, it has a motion sensor. When it detects motion on the weighing platform then takes a weight. And if the animal is 450 grams or above, then it allows a bait door to open and the animal can access the bait. So I've just got a couple of videos to show. So we trialled this method in a wood in Northumberland. So these are the type of feeders that we want to basically trial on a landscape scale as part of the Red Squirrel Recovery Network. So as you can see with the red squirrels, they attempted to access the bait 13 times and they were successful 7 times. So this might have been because some of the grey squirrels were slightly smaller and weighed slightly less. But this is why we need a lot more data to prove that this is an effective selective method. So just to show you, this is a red squirrel accessing or trying to access the same feeder, and they were unsuccessful. So they tried to access the bait a couple of times through various methods, but they were unable to do so. So for trial 1, let me just see if I can minimize this. I don't think I can. Just wanted to move this out of the way, so that's a bit better, isn't it? So, so trial 1 is basically assessing the species specificity of contraceptive feeders in red squirrel areas. So the main output is to get confirmation that a grey squirrel specific feeder can exclude all red squirrels and allow access by most grey squirrels. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to work with as many squirrel groups as possible. We'll first work with some manufacturers to develop a feeder based on the same design as I've just shown, but that's a little bit more field robust and also more cost effective, so easy to manufacture in the future as well. So we will test 2 prototype feeders. We'll do that locally at APHA, but then also with some volunteer groups. And then we'll select from the feedback that we've gained 1 for manufacture, and we'll manufacture about 150 of these feeders. And these feeders will be distributed amongst red squirrel and community groups in areas where there's both greys and reds. And what we'll want people to do is monitor the feeders with cameras and bait them for us, and basically provide us with data on non-target access to feed as well as red squirrels. So we should then be able to say that definitively these feeders can exclude reds and other non-targets whilst allowing access by greys. So our next trial, as part of the field trials, trial 2 is the assessment of bait uptake by grey squirrels to evaluate contraceptive delivery methods. So at APHA, we've been doing a number of trials to measure bait uptake in squirrel populations, and this has been based on the deployment of a bait dye which simulates contraceptive delivery. So in 14 woods so far, we've added, we've deployed these more basic feed hoppers. So these just work by having, it's a metal tube with a bait compartment that has to be accessed by pushing open a weighted door. So this is to minimize non-target access. So these are for areas where there's no red squirrels at all. So what we've done is we've baited these feeders with a dye, and basically when the squirrels eat a dye, their hair becomes fluorescent under UV light, so the dye is incorporated into the hair. And then if we trap and remove these squirrels and take a hair sample, we can look at the proportion of squirrels that have taken the bait from the feeders. So just a quick look at the summary that we found so far. So this is why we're taking these methods forward. We've basically shown that using this feeder design, we've been able to feed bait to, in the majority of cases, over 50% of squirrels in a wood. So we've tested it in different seasons and different feeder densities as well. Obviously, it's very dependent on squirrel density. So when you have a higher density of squirrels, you need a higher density of feeders. But we have shown in the majority of cases that most squirrels in most woods would feed from them. One other aspect, again, it was to monitor these feeders with cameras to make sure that other non-target animals can't access a bait. So in all of these trials, we've been monitoring the feeders with cameras. So 322 hoppers, our feeders, have been monitored so far. And they record the date and time the bait door is opened, and then we match this with the camera footage to see who's opened the door. So far in our trials, we recorded about 180,000 of photos or videos of animals in and around the hoppers. But when we looked at the door opening and who was opening it, we had around 5,000 visits by grey squirrels and only 4 visits by mice, predominantly wood mice. So this has shown, and these were the only non-targets that were recorded actually opening the bait door. So from this research, we have concluded that in grey squirrel, in areas where there's no red squirrels, in most areas in the UK, a contraceptive bait could be delivered to large numbers of greys without impacting on other wildlife. So the outputs from trial 2, we are hoping that we can measure grey squirrel bait uptake using these methods and non-target wildlife impact on a larger scale, and also to transfer the methods, the equipment and the skills required to volunteer groups to enable them to do this. So we're hoping at the end we will have a suitable design of bait feeder for contraceptive delivery in areas where there aren't red squirrels. One output will also be large-scale squirrel control over key areas, as we will be removing squirrels in order to sample them to measure the bait uptake. Also, as part of our research, we've developed a fertility control model. So this is a landscape model which simulates the effect of applying different grey squirrel management methods across a landscape. So the model has been developed based on the field trial data we've collected so far, but the additional data we'll collect as part of the Red Squirrel Recovery Network will allow us to develop and test the model further, so we can further plan how contraceptives would be delivered in the future. And finally, we want to provide further understanding on how squirrel density and population structure affects tree damage. So what we will be doing as part of these trials is collecting data on squirrel densities across landscapes, but also we'll do some tree damage surveys to look at how those squirrels are actually impacting the woodlands. So just to summarise the methods, so we will work with manufacturers to again develop 2 prototype feeders based on the design I've just shown, and we'll test it and choose one to manufacture. So we'll produce around 300 of these feeders. These feeders will then be deployed. We'll choose 2 independent woodland areas. So these could be managed by one volunteer group or one squirrel group or several. We really just need areas that have enough volunteers in order to deliver the work, but also that are grey squirrel only because of the methods we'll be using. But these woodlands will be located in 2 different counties. We will first conduct squirrel density and damage surveys in each area. So APHA will train volunteer groups to do this and provide them with the cameras and all of the equipment required. So the cameras will be deployed in woods for 1 week to get a density estimate. Then we will deploy the feeders. It will be around 250 per county, so over the 2 areas. They'll be distributed according to the density estimates we get initially. So our methods have shown that to effectively deliver contraceptives, you need to make sure that there's at least 1 hopper per 2 squirrels. So this will be informed by the density work we do beforehand. And then these feeders will be baited for 1 week, pre-baited, and then a dye will be deployed in them for 2 weeks to simulate contraceptive delivery. And all of these feeders will be monitored with cameras. And at the end, we will pay, the project will fund contractors, so trappers, to then remove the squirrels from all of the woods involved, plus up to a 500-metre buffer. So this will provide us with data on bait uptake from the squirrel populations where the bait is actually deployed, and also the surrounding area to look at the scale of impact of contraceptive delivery. And from each squirrel, we'll take a hair sample and obviously measure it for the presence of the dye to inform that. So there's a lot of equipment involved, and all of this will be funded by the project and then distributed amongst squirrel groups at the end of the project as well. So this includes traps, cameras, and any other equipment involved. So that summarises the fertility control trials. So I will hand back to Catherine. How do I stop sharing? Hang on a sec. There we go.
Okay, so one element of this project which will be new is to include a small grant scheme, a community small grant scheme. We're still developing exactly what this will look like and still developing the detail of it, but we wanted to be able to share with you where we've got to on that. Just checking that's okay. I thought I had 2 slides on that, but that's fine. So this small grant scheme will be open to not just school groups, but also other groups, so community groups or schools, maybe retirement home, residential homes, that kind of thing, might be able to apply for it as well. We'll have a budget of around £50,000 a year, but that's across the whole project, not per area. And we'll be developing some very simple and accessible application processes for people to apply, and likewise reporting processes. The types of activity that we're imagining would be funded through this scheme, but this is not a exhaustive list, because the whole point of a grant scheme is that you might get an application come in that you hadn't thought of. That's why it's in a grant scheme, not predefined activities. But the kinds of activities that might be eligible are red squirrel habitat improvements or feeding stations, events and activities that are designed to engage more people and improve awareness about red squirrels, and that could be face-to-face kind of real life type activities and experiences, or virtual, digital. Educational equipment or field trips, for example, to engage groups who've never seen red squirrels, and capital projects that might enhance ecotourism and education in red squirrel areas. We're not expecting to be supporting grey squirrel control through the small grant scheme, mainly because the grants will be too small. It is what it says, it's a small grant scheme, to really deliver that meaningfully. Yeah, so that's all on that, I think. And then I think this is my slide as well. So just to let you know what's coming up next, we've got a couple of volunteer workshops that we'd be delighted if people joined us for, and this is in response to needs identified by some of the volunteer groups that we've spoken to, and will be a kind of precursor for training that might happen within the project delivery stage. We'll be hosting a fundraising workshop. Me and Kay will be hosting a fundraising workshop, which will be a chance for groups to quiz us. And I work as a fundraising consultant, so this is my writing grants is my bread and butter, writing grant applications. So very happy to pass on any tips or knowledge of funders, etc., to groups. But also we'd be very keen to hear from you in terms of what knowledge you already have and what help you might want in the delivery phase to help access funding outside of this project. And this is probably a good time to reiterate that the National Lottery Heritage Fund have told us that putting in this big bid will not preclude groups from putting in smaller applications for work in their area. So if we could provide support to develop smaller bids. Likewise, a workshop around volunteer recruitment on the Thursday, the 11th of July. Again, an opportunity to talk to us about what that might look like, what support you might need, perhaps get some tips on the night, but also to help us to plan training for the delivery stage. And we're going to be continuing to work with NRS and the Red Squirrel Forum in Southern Scotland to continue to develop activities that are right for the groups that they're supporting. And a very quick whiz through our deadlines. So we were supposed to meet with the National Lottery Heritage Fund this week, and that's been postponed. So we were hoping we'll be able to confirm this a little bit more. it wasn't, we didn't delay it, they delayed it, but we're working towards having a development review in September and then submitting our application on the 21st of November. We'll then expect to hear the outcome of that application in February or March 2025. That date's obviously up to them. And then all being well, hopefully they say yes, hopefully they're happy and we can start the project quickly and there's not too many kind of additional steps to go through. So we've been hoping that if we secure funding, the project would start in April.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Is that the end of the presentation? Just to check yes, before I cut anybody off. Thanks very much. This is all very exciting. And I'm sure you all are keen to be involved in it, and I hope you are. So we'll now move on to our Q&A session. And there are a couple of questions in here which are for Sarah. But if you have any other questions about the project or about anything else, anything that they've talked about today, please just put them in the Q&A session. Sarah, is the induced infertility permanent in each animal?
So no, it's unlikely to be permanent. So the vaccine that we're looking at, like with many other vaccines, as soon as the antibody titers drop in the body, then the vaccine wears off. So then the infertility would be reversed. So what we're trying to do, what we're aiming for, is to obviously produce something that's going to last as long as possible, but at the very least, something that could maybe be deployed twice a year to cover the main peaks of squirrel breeding. So yeah, we've shown that we can, as I just mentioned, we've shown that we can deliver it to the majority of squirrels in woodlands within a week. So to be able to have to deploy it maybe a couple of times a year, we don't see as being a massive undertaking when you compare it to other methods such as shooting and culling.
Thanks very much, Sarah.
Yeah.
There's a question around, sorry, no, sorry, I thought I heard someone else. How will we deal with those producing or deploying unofficial or non-standard or knockoff feeders? Will there be a certification process? Will access to the contraceptive be restricted or licensed?
So obviously we don't want access to the contraceptive to be overly restrictive because we want to be able to deploy it on as wide a scale as possible, but we would probably require some kind of license, maybe similar to the LANTRA certification, for example, that's used at the moment for people who want to vaccinate badgers against TB, or there's actually the Grey Squirrel Management LANTRA course as well. So there's certainly going to be certain restrictions in terms of how you use the contraceptive. So it would have to be used with one of our specified feeders to ensure that it's delivered effectively and safely with minimal impact on non-target animals.
Okay, I'll just continue along the contraceptive line for a moment.
Okay.
Sorry, Sarah.
It's okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Is it worth just adding to that answer that we're not expecting the contraceptive to be available during this project, and one of the reasons that we're doing this project and we're building all of this into this project is to allow us time to properly test and answer some of those questions and kind of work out whether people building their own feeders is going to be a problem, how much of a problem that might be, and to keep working with groups to resolve that and find the right answers to those questions as well, I think.
Yeah, totally. And this is looking at it outside of the researchers delivering it and to how it'll actually work on the ground at a landscape scale with real people, if I can say that. Sorry, Sarah.
Yes.
So I have put a couple of links in the chat for updates if anybody wants any further information. But is there any potential impacts up the food chain for the oral contraceptive?
So we don't think there will be. At the moment, our biggest challenge is actually getting the contraceptive to last long enough in the body to actually stimulate enough of a response. So it readily breaks down. It doesn't last in the environment very long. the only thing that's left over from its impact is basically the antibodies in the bloodstream. So unless I guess a predator would have to eat many squirrels who have literally just taken the contraceptive and still have it in their guts for any effect to be seen. However, this is part of the registration process. So before the contraceptive can be distributed on a wider scale and for general use, then it will have to go through a 5-year registration process in which we will have to prove that it will have minimal environmental impact and also prove its effectiveness as well.
Thank you. And what's the time frame we're working to?
So as I said, yeah, as I mentioned, so the original, so the current aim is for 2030 to have a registered product, but that's all based on how well the lab trials go in the next year. So in the next 6 months, we have some lab trials planned. And yeah, it all depends on whether we can, like I said, maximize the response in the body from the contraceptive.
Thank you. And just one final question on fertility control. Have the feeders been tested with dormice?
So as I mentioned, they've only been tested. We've tested them with other volunteer groups, but they've been tested on a fairly small scale. So obviously, at the previous research we've done with them, we've been collecting a lot of data and doing a lot of very technical trials with them. But now we want to give them to volunteer groups with a bit of training just to see if we get the same kind of results we've seen on a small scale on a much bigger scale.
Brilliant, thanks, Sarah. I'll stop pestering now. So moving on to more project-based questions. Are the workshops virtual or at venues, and will invitations joining instructions be shared with all the Red Squirrel groups?
So the workshops are going to be virtual online, but they're going to be live discussions rather than using this webinar format, but very much focused on those single topics. I believe the dates have been sent out, haven't they, Mike? Or are they yet to go out? The dates and the
I think they're yet to go out, but they are the dates that you've announced.
yeah.
Are they,
So
and their evening timings, are they? Or
yeah, they are 6 o'clock starts, I think. But if anybody can't make those dates that I put up on the slide and would still like to have some fundraising advice or advice around volunteer recruitment, just get in touch and I'm happy to talk to people about that.
I think as well, it's important to say that these sessions that we're running now in the development phase are intended to develop further sessions that will be undertaken in the delivery phase, the 5-year phase. So if you can't make a session now, don't worry about it. There will be more sessions in the future and on different topics too.
right. In terms of the project advisory group, will there be a role for volunteer group participation in some way?
Yes, very much so. The intention of the project advisory group is to get a wider group in which that opinions can be drawn from, and also ideas. So the volunteer groups will be represented, but also a wide range of stakeholders and interested organisations and parties as well. So it's certainly envisaged to be a wider group as possible.
Brilliant, thanks, Mike. What support will there be for volunteer groups for grey squirrel trapping during the project?
Do you want to take that, Mike, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I can take that. The intention of the project is to obviously be as sustainable as possible on the long term and try and provide the support to the volunteer groups so that they're able to continue in the future as well. So we felt that we wouldn't be able to provide, say, a number of ranges and things like that across the whole of the project area that actually have any long-term benefit. There are some ranges, for example, the RSRN ranges, working as part of the project, but the money, the contracts that they work under will all be used as the match funding. So there is grey squirrel work as part of the project, but that will not be individual contracts for all areas.
But we also are hoping, or not just hoping, the project is planning that additional staff capacity will be able to work with groups to engage landowners, look at new agri-environment scheme agreements, stewardship agreements, etc., whatever's relevant in whichever country you're in. And also through increasing awareness. And the biggest thing that came back on the consultation that we did at the end of 22 from groups, and this has been repeated when we've been speaking to some of the groups, is that the biggest challenge is getting more volunteers to help with the trapping and the grey squirrel management. So there will be some support in that area in terms of supporting groups to be able to recruit more volunteers, and us raising more awareness. So when groups are trying to recruit more volunteers, there's just a bit more awareness locally about what that means and what red squirrel conservation is all about and why it's important.
And
there is, sorry, there is a fund for an equipment fund for the groups. So that will be providing things like traps, cameras, in order to support the groups undertaking grey squirrel control work themselves.
Yeah, this is very much geared up towards trying to support and enhance what's going on, I think. Another question for Sarah, sorry. The usage of bait stations is highly seasonal, high use in summer, lower in autumn when natural food sources are abundant. You may not be able to rely on a high proportion of squirrels taking the bait outside the summer season. What seasonal effects have you seen, Sarah?
So I think I showed in my slide, the bait uptake studies we've done so far, we've really focused on winter, summer and spring, and we've achieved really good levels of delivery to high proportions of squirrel populations in those seasons. We haven't tried autumn because we know that it's not a very good time to try and deliver bait to squirrels, but also it's not a good time in terms of delivering a contraceptive to suppress breeding. So obviously to suppress, to stop breeding throughout the whole of the squirrel breeding season, we really want to be delivering contraceptives in winter, spring and summer. So these are the main seasons we focused on.
Thanks, Sarah. There's a comment I think in here really about grey squirrels breeding all year round and groups are struggling, and 6 years until we have fertility control may be too long. But I think what you have to realise is research works the way it does, and you have to make sure that what you're creating is effective and safe to use. And the process is the process, and we're going as fast as we can. We hope to have something, we would like to have something to you tomorrow, but we can only go as fast as the process is to make sure that what we have is effective. But we appreciate that this is a struggle, and we hope that the Red Squirrel Recovery Network does provide some solutions to that. Yeah.
Can I just add as well? I mean, also, if the next trials we do go amazingly well, and we have the product ready to go, we would initially have to obviously test it in quite controlled field trials first to ensure it's safe and effective. But even beyond that, you still have a 4 to 5 year registration process, which can't be avoided. And unfortunately, because a contraceptive is such a novel substance to want to be giving to wildlife, then unfortunately that registration process, it's very important, but it's also a little bit more complex than your average pharmaceutical, like even like a toxin that you'd want to actually deliver to wildlife.
Yeah, I think once we've done ours, that will then open the door to make it available maybe for other species more easily. Is that right, Sarah?
Yeah. Well, the contraceptive we're developing can potentially affect any mammals, so it will be available potentially for a lot of different species. You'd need specific delivery methods for it, but yeah, it could be used for deer, badgers, any other kind of overabundant species that are causing issues in certain areas.
So I think this is quite a novel and groundbreaking piece of research, and to be involved in it, I think should be celebrated, really. And we will get it to you as soon as we possibly can.
But I think also it's worth saying that we are using that argument with the lottery and saying, you know, these potential solutions are kind of just around the corner, but also that corner's quite long.
Yeah, yeah.
Take quite a long time to get there. So we need their investment now, and that's why we're going big and asking for a big investment. What we really need is to increase capacity within our partners to support groups, but also to raise awareness at all levels, get more public support for grey squirrel control, but also to be able to be raising awareness at strategic levels and even political levels.
Yeah.
It's really important that that happens, not just for red squirrels, but for all species, and to keep kind of species conservation, nature conservation, and control of non-native species on the political agenda. And we can't do that without staff. That is the importance of this project, and the point that we're making to the lottery is if you don't fund it now, we'll lose this species forever. You need to buy us some time to allow for these other things to embed in and become a reality.
Yeah, I think I should just clarify what I said as well, Robert, because I think it's too simple to say that we're holding the line or we're winning the war. You know, we actually, that wouldn't be a convincing argument to the lottery either. We're going to them because there's a real jeopardy, absolute jeopardy still around this species. And that's why we need this funding and these new methods to add to everything else we're doing. I think it's almost just immense effort that's kept these animals in the landscape. They are very widespread still, and there are local successes. It's a complex picture again, but yeah, I wouldn't want to pretend that we're actually just around the corner from winning the overall war, because that's not the case.
No. Yeah. Are there any last words from the speakers before I wrap up?
I've got a question, response actually to to Bob's question around funding. The project will look at funding opportunities for volunteer groups and as such for grey squirrel management. Things such as the Countryside Stewardship now has a direct payment for grey squirrel control by landowners. And I think this can be a key tool for the volunteer groups to utilise in order to be paid for the work they're already doing in certain areas. And things like having the another project officer in Cumbria, for example, will provide us with the opportunity to engage with more landowners, to make them aware of the funding that is available now, and then make the links between those landowners and the volunteer groups who can deliver that control work for them and get paid to do it. So that is one way in which we are actually looking to provide those funding links.
Great, thank you, Mike. Anything from anyone else? No? Okay, thank you. Just to let you know that this webinar was recorded and will be resent to Mike at RSRN for further sharing. I just want to say a big thank you to our speakers and everyone that is working on this important Red Squirrel Network Recovery Network project. There is a wider team, and we hope this will breathe extra life into red squirrel conservation. I also want to thank every one of you for all the amazing work you do every day, week and year to ensure red squirrels have a real future in England and Scotland. It is no small feat and it needs to be celebrated. As the project develops, we will keep you up to date with further progress. But for now, I hope you enjoy the rest of this beautiful summer solstice evening. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye all.
Bye.
Bye.